Today, we dive into a story that feels small on the surface. Canada shifting away from American whiskey imports. But if you look closely, it's not just about alcohol. It's about pride, politics, and the fragile ties between two of the closest neighbors on Earth. This story is about how something as simple as a bottle of bourbon can set fire to debates, ripple through economies, and ignite emotions across borders. And trust me, by the end, you'll see why this isn't just a Canadian decision. It's a global signal. Think about it. When we talk about U.S. exports, people imagine planes, cars, oil, soybeans, tech. But whiskey is cultural power. It's Kentucky pride. It's American tradition bottled up and shipped around the world. And Canada, America's neighbor, has been one of the most loyal buyers. Until now. Why would Canada pull back? Why would they deliberately shrink imports from a neighbor they share a border of nearly 9,000 kilometers with? The answer lies in the tension of recent years. Tariffs, trade wars, and political statements dressed as economic policy. Canada is sending a message, and it's not one the U.S. will ignore. But let's slow down for a second. This isn't just a trade dispute. This is personal, because when people in the U.S. hear that Canada no longer wants their whiskey, they don't just hear trade. They hear, our neighbors are turning their backs on us. And when Canadians hear that their government is pushing away from U.S. imports, many cheer. It's about independence, standing up to Big Brother America. And that's where Trump enters the picture. Donald Trump, who built his political brand on America First, who has been warning for years that U.S. allies are not as loyal as they seem, suddenly looks at this move from Canada and says, "See? I told you so." Because let's be clear, this is more than whiskey. This is about trust. It's about whether the U.S. can count on Canada when the stakes are high. And in a world where alliances are tested daily, from Ukraine to the South China Sea, this matters. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. Canada didn't just cut back randomly. They're not stopping imports because people stopped drinking. No, the market is alive, demand is strong. They're pulling back strategically. They're shifting to European and local suppliers. Why? To reduce dependence on the U.S. and to make a statement. We have options, we don't need to bow down. Imagine walking into a Canadian liquor store 5 years ago. American whiskey dominated the shelves. Now, slowly, bottle by bottle, the labels are changing. And every bottle missing says something political. America is losing influence right in its own backyard. Let me pause and ask you this. If Canada, America's closest friend, feels bold enough to make this kind of move, what do you think other U.S. allies are thinking? If Canada can push away U.S. whiskey, could Europe push away U.S. tech? Could Asia push away U.S. oil? And this is where the algorithm of politics gets interesting. Because Trump knows how to spin this in a fire. He can stand on stage and say, "They laughed at me when I warned about our allies. Now look, even Canada won't buy our whiskey." It's emotional, it's powerful, and it hits Americans where it hurts, not just the wallet, but the heart. Because whiskey is a symbol, and symbols are everything in politics. But let's not forget the economics. Cutting U.S. whiskey imports means American distillers lose millions. Jobs in Kentucky, Tennessee, across the Midwest, they feel the hit. Families that have been bottling bourbon for generations suddenly face uncertainty. And when they ask why, the answer isn't demand, it's diplomacy. Now here's where things get even heavier. This story isn't just Canada versus US. It's about who fills the gap. Because when one country pulls back, another steps in. Europe, yes, but also China. China has been steadily expanding its influence in global trade. And if Canada starts looking east, even in small industries like alcohol, it plants seeds. Seeds that could grow into much bigger shifts. If whiskey can be replaced, so can wheat. If whiskey can be replaced, so can oil. Think about that. A move that seems so small, a bottle on a shelf, becomes a sign of shifting power. And America, already juggling trade wars, can't afford to lose ground at home. Not with allies, not with Canada. And this is why people are fired up online. Canadians are debating. Should we support local industries, even if it costs more? Americans are raging. Why would Canada turn on us after decades of friendship? And in the middle, economists warn. Trade wars start like this: small cuts, small moves, then escalation. If you're still watching, you're the kind of person who loves getting the full story, not just the headlines. So go ahead and subscribe. You'll be part of this community that digs deeper and asks the tough questions. Now, let's zoom out even further. This whiskey boycott is also about identity. Canadians have long lived in the shadow of their southern neighbor. American culture, American movies, American music, it dominates. By cutting off whiskey imports, Canada is signaling we want to stand apart. We want to define ourselves differently. That sentiment resonates deeply among younger Canadians who are tired of being compared to Americans. But is it practical? That's the struggle. Because separating emotionally is one thing. Separating economically is another. And here's where you, the viewer, come in. I want you to think about this. Is Canada making a brave stand for its own culture, or is it simply risking economic chaos for symbolism? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Visual, subscribe reminder on screen with share your comment. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next deep dive into how these trade battles shape our future. Now, let's circle back to Trump, because you know he's not letting this one slide. He's already promising in fiery speeches that he'll make Canada pay if he wins the White House again. Whether that means tariffs, trade punishments, or personal attacks, nobody knows. But history tells us Trump never forgets a slight. And in politics, revenge sells. If Trump weaponizes Canada's whiskey boycott in his campaign, it won't just be a policy debate, it'll be a rallying cry. And if history has shown us anything, it's that rallying cries can win elections. Meanwhile, Trudeau is banking on Canadians rallying around national pride. But pride is a dangerous gamble when wallets are thin. If the boycott backfires and Canadians face higher prices or fewer choices, the government will take the heat. Visual, grocery. So what's the future? Best case, both sides quietly negotiate, slap a new trade deal on the table, and move on. Worst case, this whiskey dispute becomes the spark that lights a much bigger fire, one that burns through industries, politics, and even friendships across the border. And let me leave you with this thought. When neighbors start fighting over a drink, it's never just about the drink. It's about respect. It's about trust. And once trust breaks, rebuilding it can take generations. So next time you raise a glass, whether in Kentucky or in Calgary, remember, that sip carries more than flavor. It carries history, politics, and the fragile ties that hold nations together. Because sometimes the biggest battles don't happen on the battlefield. They happen at the dinner table or at the bar. And that's exactly why this story matters. So what do you think? Is Canada boldly carving its own future or recklessly poking the bear? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you see whiskey differently tonight, share this video with a friend. Because history isn't just written in speeches or treaties. Sometimes it's written in the glass we raise. And when the glass shatters, the echo isn't just heard in bars, it's heard in the hearts of nations.